बस अब यहाँ पे जाके से वो शेयर का ऑप्शन आ जाएगा सर।
ओके,
मैं वैसे यही
देख लेना। ठीक,
कैमरा आवाज
सब कैमरा चल रहा है। आई थिंक आई एम एबल टू स्पीक टू हिम। द प्रिंसिपल, या आई एम एबल टू स्पीक। हाँ ठीक है, स्कूल नो इश्यूज। Yes, now I think it's about 10 o'clock. Only 8 people.
Sir, good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, I think it's time that we can begin.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good morning, Vanakkam and Namaste for this AICTE Distinguished Chair Professor scheme. Respected Dr. Prem Raj, Distinguished Professor, on behalf of Hindustan Institute of Technology, Coimbatore, Tamil Nadu, I welcome our distinguished Chair Professor. This expert talk is organized by Hindustan Institute of Technology in collaboration with AICTE for the benefit of faculty members and students. We are 14 years old institution accredited by NAC with A grade and accredited by NBA for 4 of our UG programs. We are autonomous institution and we have been ranked to rank excellent in ARIA ranking, Atal ranking of institutions on innovation achievements. With this, I am very happy and indebted to AICTE for making this expert talk for our institution as one of the institutions to be chosen for this scheme. I am very, very happy to have Professor Prem Virat because he is an experienced teacher, researcher, management development and consultancy person, and he has lot of credits in his Professor Prem Virat is the Chairman Board of Governors of Indian Institute of Technology, Denver, with additional charge as Chairman Board of Governors of IIT Mandi. An outstanding academic, Professor Virat is a Pro-Chancellor, Professor of Eminence and Chief Mentor of the North Cap University, Gurgaon, formerly ITM University, Gurgaon. Just prior joining to ITNU as the Vice Chancellor in September 2011, he was Professor of Eminence at the Management Development Institute, Gurgaon. Professor Virat was Founder Director, IIT Roorkee, Vice Chancellor, UP Technical University, Lucknow. Now it is APJ Abdul Kalam Technical University, Lucknow. Professor at IIT Delhi, Professor and Division Chairman of Asian Institute of Technology, Bangkok. He is an honorary professor at IIT and distinguished adjunct professor at AIT Bangkok. He was Chairman Board of Governors of WIT Dehradun, a constituent institute of Uttarakhand Technological University. Now he is an AICTE distinguished chair professor. Professor Prem Virat was an honorary research fellow at the Department of Engineering Production, University of Birmingham, UK, and as an international visiting fellow at University of Western Sydney, Australia. He has extensive experience of more than 53 years in teaching, research, management development and consultancy. We are very, very happy to welcome such an experienced person to address our students and faculty and also the students and faculty of various institutions across India. Once again, we thank this experienced person and also AICTE for making this for our institution as a destination for this expert talk. And now I welcome Professor Prem Virat to have and to continue this expert talk for the benefit of the students and faculty members. Welcome you, sir. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Natarajan, and good morning, friends, all participating in virtual mode from your respective locations, the dear faculty and students of Hindustan Institute of Technology, which is the main host for this particular talk this morning. I'm very delighted to be communicating with you through this mode, because that is the mode through which I can reach a wider cross-section of the students' community and the faculty. Now, the topic that has been given to me for the first deliberation on first lecture is situational approach to management, for effective management under VUCA environment. Now, actually, let me tell you that the scheme I had given a list of around 24 topics for faculty and students, and any other topic that you would like me to speak within my domain. And then I leave it to the institution to choose a topic. And this, therefore, the first of the series of the 5 AICTE mandates up to 5 lecture sessions per institution in a year. And I've been on this job for quite some time. Most of the institutions that have been given to me happen to be in South, and there were many in Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Gujarat, Maharashtra, just 2 in UP and 1 in Odisha. So that perhaps is maybe this mode of communication perhaps is very effective for long distance places. So this theme of situational approach for managerial effectiveness in a VUCA environment is something which indeed could be useful to anyone. And as you know that, and I'm presuming that some of you might have a background in management education. Some of you may not, because this is across a wider cross-section of society. I wish to share with you the relevance of this topic and how important it is in contemporary times, and how Indians perhaps have a great opportunity of leading the management leadership amongst organizations globally because of this VUCA environment. And therefore, because we inherently enjoy doing it. Now, to give an idea of what is known as contingency theory of management or situational approach to management, what it means, and therefore this is almost one of the latest paradigm in management thinking. As you know, that management has been debated over decades and maybe century. There are different theories of management that have emerged. Classical traditional approach to management, which started with scientific management of Frederick Taylor and his co-workers. Henry Fayol's Universal School of Management, 14 Principles of Management by Henry Fayol. Bureaucratic model of Max Weber, and the functional approach to management, which looks at management as planning, organizing, directing, control. That management is a process, is a function, and anyone who is performing these 4 functions of managing, planning, organizing, directing, control is a manager. But then came this behavioral school of management as a counter to the traditional approach, because the human factor was deemed to have been excluded. But what's critical, and that brings a theme to here, is that the systems approach to management and the contingency theory to management, to me, these are 2 sides of the same coin. So if you look at a management of an organization holistically in its totality, or the systems approach to management, and alternatively you call it a contingency theory of management or situational approach to management, to me they are primal dual. Primal dual means the 2 ways of saying the same thing. And that's why the current paradigm in managing organizations effectively and efficiently. Now, you must also be aware of the difference between efficiency and effectiveness in managing organizations. Efficiency and effectiveness are not the same thing. Efficiency may be dealing only with the resource utilization or the productivity of the system, the output. You may be efficient without being effective, or you may be effective without being efficient. What's required as a manager of any system, including academics management, is to be both efficient as well as effective. Efficiency is doing things right, and effectiveness is doing the right thing. You may be doing efficient things, but on wrong projects, on wrong courses. You may be teaching very well, but you are not teaching a course which is relevant. That's being efficient without being effective, and therefore, as a result, in the contingency theory of management or systems approach to management, what it finally says, in fact, it might look ridiculously simple, but it's so difficult to do. What finally the contingency theory of management says, that there is no single best way of managing every situation. There is no single best way, there is no single best theory of managing an organization. The only way to know what is the best way of managing an organization, the only general answer you can give is, it depends, that's all. And therefore, as a result, managing an academic institution can be so different from managing a defense organization, or managing a transport corporation, or managing a private consulting company, or managing a government bureaucracy. And therefore, what the contingency theory of management or systems approach of management says, that when you look at a problem in its totality, there are a number of interdependent parameters or situations or subsystems that an organization has to take care of. And therefore, managing a problem holistically finally boils down to aligning various situational parameters and come out a style of management for effectiveness, so that all these subsystems are in mutual alignment. There's no mismatch. Major problems of mismanagement, therefore, is because of the mismatch of subsystems. For example, you might have the latest technology, but your manpower is not trained to operate that technology properly. There is a mismatch between human resources and technology, because simply acquiring technology is no guarantee, and that's why it says in a quality paradox, that thinking that quality alone would deliver, the technology alone would deliver quality is no good. It's the integration of all these situational parameters that together we determine. And therefore, situational theory or contingency theory of management, which is also systems approach to management, says that the best way to manage a system depends upon the situational parameters. And that's why the name situational variables. And therefore, what is important, and this brings a tremendous element of flexibility required on the part of managers, because no two systems are identical. No two organizations are identical. Even no two IITs are identical. And therefore, managing an institution with the same standard as somebody else has succeeded in some other context. I might have succeeded in some other context, and that's what I've done. For example, all my life I've been in IT system. But to manage a state-private university may not be same as managing an IT system. To manage an affiliated college is not the same thing as managing an institution which is standalone university. And therefore, what it says, that to be effective as a manager, you need to first identify the parameters or the subsystems which are interdependent on each other, and then evolve a style so that the various subsystems are not out of sync. It says that is primarily the lack of effectiveness in management is primarily due to the mismanagement or misalignment of the situational factors. You have one parameter is not matching with the other one, and that's why evolving that alignment is the key. Now, it looks simple, but it's one of the most difficult things. What it therefore calls for, that even in the same organization, for example, during COVID time, in the same organization, under different situational uncertainty, one has to manage differently, because what was known earlier, the way we were managing our organizations in normal times is so different from the way we were managing in COVID times. And therefore, as a result, it is the capacity of a manager to quickly switch over to a new way of managing a situation, because the previous style has become outdated in current times. So therefore, at different point of time, managing a non-linear interacting dynamical systems would therefore require a tremendous amount of flexibility on the part of the manager, because the same stereotype style would not work in all situations. And the moment we are able to develop that flexibility of switching over with ease to new style, we have become a contingency-driven managers. And therefore, in fact, there are two components of my presentation, and I'll be very happy for interaction that follows after my lecture. First, I give you an idea, a very brief overview, although, as I mentioned, some of you might have already known it, but since the talk is open to a large cross-section, just to give a very, and then I come to what is most critical today is the VUCA environment. VUCA is in fact is an acronym for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Now, today's business environment, because of globalization and because of enormous amount of factors that are, bringing impinging uncertainty in our functioning, our operating environment in which we are expected to conduct business of any kind, including academic institutions, has become increasingly uncertain. You are not certain about even the kind of admissions. Earlier, you were almost assured that whatever seats you have would be filled in. Today, that kind of environment doesn't exist. There are enormous amount of uncertainties, volatility in the external environment, because as you know that no organization works in isolation. We work in under a shroud of a bigger supra-system. It's called environmental supra-system. And I must mention to those who may not be conversant with management terms, the word environment in management context does not mean physical environment. It's not the heat, temperature, and the quality of air. It is the business environment. And the business environment means who are the external stakeholders who impact on your functioning. They are known as significant others. For example, an organization always works under impact of those people whom you do not control, but they impact you. For example, now that's why in the management parlance you call them significant others. They're others, they're external to your system, but they impact you, they affect you. And you cannot ignore their presence. And therefore, if you ignore the external environment and under which you are doing business, you cannot survive for long, because you cannot sustain an organization by being at loggerheads with the external environment in which you are working. And therefore, it's an extremely important for every manager of a system to align itself with the factors that are beyond their control, yet they impact them. And that's why they are called as significant others. For example, the significant others could be your competitors. Your competitors are not part of a system, but they affect you. If somebody is offering better value for money than you, they may attract the customers more than you get it, and they put or your competitor is not a part of your system, but it impacts you. The government, the policies, the legislation, the judiciary, the unions, the demography of the country, the economic conditions, the technological conditions, and that's why you carry out that pest analysis or the environmental scanning. So what's important in this context is to recognize this, and therefore let me see, if I can able to see my, I share, you are presenting, let me see. Okay. No, this is wrong. Yeah, are you able to see this? Can you give me some? Hello? Are you able to see this? Hello?
Sir, presentation is not available, sir.
Are you able to see this? No. Huh?
No, sir. No, sir.
No, I'm getting that result. ये आ नहीं रहा, नहीं देख पा रहे, पूछा मैंने इसको कैसे करना है। ये ऊपर होगा सिचुएशन,
नहीं वो कोई बात नहीं सर, वो कहाँ है सर, जो आपकी मीटिंग जो चल रही है,
मीटिंग ये वाली, हाँ शेयर करना है। ओके, ये शेयर आ गया,
इसमें देख पा रहे हो?
Are you able to see it now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. That's the part of uncertainty. Anyway, once I have resolved this, it will take care. Now, therefore, as you know that the title is Situational Approach for Effective Management in VUCA Environment. And therefore, first I'll focus very quickly, just by way of, and then I'll focus more on the effective management in VUCA environment, which is contemporary. And therefore, now the situational theory or contingency theory of management says that effective management primarily is evolving a right managerial alignment amongst various subsystems of the organization or the situational variables. As I said, that the theory says that there is no one best way of managing every situation. The right style of managing a situation depends upon the situation or situational variables, and therefore, since this theory is still in the nascent stage, this is one of the views. For example, you can divide the situational parameters into these there are six subsystems, and the topmost is outer environment, the external environment. In what kind of external business environment you are conducting your operations? That becomes an external shroud under which you are, as I said, no organization works in isolation. For example, your employees who come to work for you, your faculty which comes to work with you, they're part of a bigger society. And therefore, they're all already impacting whatever their values, systems, and attitude towards colleagues, and attitude towards, duty. All they come to you with that kind of. So the external environment is one of the biggest factor, and this is what has made a difference in today's environment, being the VUCA environment. Therefore, whatever style of management took place, maybe when we had a stable environment, that whatever you could pick and choose. You had enormous amount of demand for a subject and courses, whichever subject in whatever seats you offered, people would take it because that was an assured, demand environment. Today, that has not happened, and therefore, the first situational parameter is outer environment. The second is objectives, the goals that you set. For example, what are your objectives of every organization is a purposive system. It has a goal to be accomplished. It is an objectives to be met, and therefore, the kind of objectives that you set, the kind of technology that you require, the kind of organization structure that you need to create, and what kind of people that you have or you hire or they constitute. So therefore, these are situational variables, and hence the management style of managing all these parameters in such a manner that you are able to evolve the right managerial alignment so that your objectives are in tune with the external environment. The technology that you employ is in tune with the objectives and the external environment. The organization structure that you create is in tune with the technology, objectives, and environment. And all this is in tune with the kind of people that you employ or that you hire, because the personality predisposition style of people is very different. And therefore, the right style of management is contingent upon all these situational parameters. And if you're effective as a manager, only when you're able to evolve a style which all these situational variables are not at conflict with each other, but they are in mutual alignment. And therefore, it's a mismatch amongst these parameters, which is the root cause of many problems of mismanagement. And therefore, this is the theory. Now, of course, very quickly, one has to, for example, how do I characterize these parameters? For example, external environment, the degree of uncertainty. Yeah, on one extreme, you have stable environment, and the other one is uncertain. That's a VUCA environment. And therefore, whatever management style was working in a stable environment is no longer relevant in managing an organization in current situation. And therefore, the degree of uncertainty is one such parameter, which indeed is a major theme of my presentation. Now, and therefore, managing uncertainty, you need to find out how do you characterize an external environment. And one of the ways is to measure the degree of uncertainty, of course, in a continuum manner from stable to uncertain. Now, some of the parameters of which tell you how to manage the degree of uncertainty. For example, the rapid rate of change. The rate of change is so huge. They're extremely dynamic. The rate of change is very difficult to predict. You can't even know what the prediction becomes very difficult. Consequences of actions are difficult to predict. If you do something, at least in a stable environment, you can say, if I do this, only this will happen. You're able to link cause-effect relationship very clearly. But here, if you can't even relate consequence of action, if you do something, it may happen, it may happen, it may happen. And at best, you can assign certain probabilities of the possible outcome, but you're never sure of the outcome as a consequence of action. It makes the environment far more uncertain. Or if it takes long and very uncertain feedback response time, before you get to know what are you on the right track, a lot of time is spent, and only end of the years you get to know that you are not on the right track. Obviously, because when you have long and uncertain feedback response time, very large number of stakeholders, for example, that's, as I mentioned, the external environment comprises of a large number of significant others. So larger the number of stakeholders outside the system. Inside stakeholders, your employees, for example, your students, your faculty, your administrators, your promoters, your owners, regulators. Now the external stakeholders are the regulators, the competitors, the unions, the state of the economy, the technological, social environment, political system, all those factors. Larger the number of stakeholders, greater the degree of uncertainty. It was understandable. And much worse, when these stakeholders have varied aspiration levels. For example, one of the stakeholders expects something, some other stakeholders expect something else. And when therefore these large number of stakeholders have varied aspiration levels, and therefore this makes the external environment of doing business extremely uncertain. And our current VUCA environment, I'll deliberate more on that. Our current VUCA environment actually is full of uncertainty because all these parameters are present in that environment which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. The first thing therefore you do is to start identifying, and that's why this is known as environmental scanning. Now what's important, for example, given that I'm working in an uncertain environment, how do I set my objective? This is important for organizations because stereotype approaches to goal setting will not do in an uncertain. Example, if you're stable environment, you can prescribe fixed prescribed objectives. So for example, if you are assured of all the whatever admissions capacity that you have in now, I'm giving the example of an academic institution. If suppose you are assured that whatever seats you have created would always be filled in with a good degree of selectivity ratio, then you could fix a predetermined targets that I'll admit 150, 120 in this branch, 160 in this branch, 120 in that branch. But if the uncertainty in the external, you are not sure about the demand environment, then what it says, if you're working under uncertainty, it is not a great idea to have a very rigidly prescribed objectives. Because pre-specified fixed objectives is a mismatch in an uncertain environment because the environment, and therefore in objective setting, what you need to do, you have to be flexible in goal setting. For example, prior fixed predetermined pre-specified objectives would be a mismatch. You need to, objective setting has to be flexible to be negotiated in the external environment. For example, the number of seats you need to create in a branch has to be negotiated with the kind of demand that exists in the external environment. And if we have a predetermined fixed number of seats in every branch of engineering, maybe that in one particular branch it will be overfilled and the other one would remain vacant. That's what happens in, and therefore what's important, the key word here is flexibility. Having a rigidly defined goals and targets of performance in an uncertain environment is a mismatch. And therefore what's critical, that you have, instead of prescribing a point objective, you prescribe a range objective. For example, say that our attainment, instead of saying that, for example, I give an example of a manufacturing system, instead of saying that you will produce 8,000 cars a month, you will say we'll produce between 5,000 to 10,000 cars in a month, depending upon the demand. So therefore, an important alignment in goal setting is don't be rigid in goal setting. A rigid goal setting of a prescribed goal setting is a mismatch in a VUCA environment. And therefore, a keyword that emerges from here is be flexible in goal setting. Flexibility is a keyword in fact in today's time. The third is technology. Now, if you have a very stable environment, you have fixed objectives, you can use state-of-the-art technology. It's called routine technology in terms of parallel. Routine technology is state-of-the-art, almost completely automated systems. But when you are working in a VUCA environment, routine technology would not work. You actually have to make use of non-routine technology, which means that every case needs to be looked at its, and therefore a technology which is multi-purpose, general purpose, and can take care of different situations on the basis of this. Now, for example, if you take the case of a hospital, in a hospital system, if a department is, let's say, radiography, where you're doing X-rays, or now it's almost a routine technology because you can straightway say, I'll do 110 X-rays in a day. You can prescribe fixed objectives because you're employing a routine technology of right. But suppose you are working in a department, psychiatry department. Let's say you're dealing with mental disorder. You're not sure even one patient may take the whole day. So you can prescribe that you'll treat 110 patients per day if you're working in a different environment, because every way of dealing with each individual patient has to be unique, and that's called non-routine technology. So don't involve a routine automated system in a context when the environment is uncertain and you have flexibility of objectives. The fourth is structure. What kind of organization structure do you create? Now, high degree of bureaucracy, high degree of formalization, a lot of rules and policies are codified. Now, formalization or bureaucratization of organization structure is okay if rigid, codified, centralized authority is only in case of stable environment. So if you have a stable environment, you have fixed objectives, you employ routine technology, and have a very formal, codified, structured, bureaucratic organization structure. But if you're working in an uncertain environment, there has to be a greater degree of flexibility in your organization structure, greater informal groups, informal teams, and rigid code rules will not apply, because you cannot have a possible rule for every situation in a highly dynamic world. So greater degree of rules in your policies and has to be created. Rigid rules in an uncertain environment, again, is a mismatch. Then comes, and one of the most difficult characteristics, people. The fifth contingency variable is what kind of people constitute your workforce. This is one of the most important and yet most difficult to characterize. For example, one of the ways to know what kind of people constitute your workforce, this is, for example, your attitude towards authority. Now, for example, how does an employee in an organization look at his boss? In fact, this could be a very positive approach or very negative approach. For example, I'm only comparing two scenarios. Let's say J, let's say you can attribute roughly to Japanese situation, and I could be, let's say, roughly to Indian situation. All this is just an idea. It's not to be seen in almost. For example, just for illustration, attitude towards authority is generally very positive in the context of Japanese workforce. That normally what the manager says, you tend to believe, you tend to accept, and you work. And therefore, a positive attitude towards boss is one of the personality profile of the people that you hire. If it is negative, your first attitude is to oppose. You don't like it. I mean, you resent. Okay, why is he asking me to do this? So therefore, your attitude towards authority, the kind of people whom you hire, what attitude they come. And that's why, to me, the attitude is the biggest single factor in hiring of people. So when you hire faculty or when you have people, apart from the knowledge and skills that they have, the positive attitude is an extremely important requirement, because if you have positive attitude, you can find solutions to every problem. But if you have negative attitude, you'll find problem with every solution that you offer. And therefore, one of the personality predisposition profile of people is what is their attitude towards authority. Is it positive? They feel that the manager or the senior person indeed means well, and therefore his authority is. Tolerance to ambiguity is one of, for example, tolerance to ambiguity. Now, this is what particularly, as I mentioned, that in Indian environment, VUCA is a great boon for Indian context, because what happens as Indians, our tolerance to ambiguity is very, very high, particularly on time front. For example, in Japanese context, the lateness of a train may be measured in, if a train is 2 seconds late, you treat it as late. Imagine if we had prescribed that precision for lateness of train, that if a train is 2 seconds late, we'll call it as late. Almost every train would be late, because we have enormous tolerance for ambiguity, very high tolerance for ambiguity, and low tolerance for precision. And therefore, if your people have very high tolerance ambiguity, particularly on time, as you know that on time front, plus minus half an hour here and there, and generally on the plus height. So if you're 30 minutes late, you normally do not think that you are late. As a result, another feature of manpower is their tolerance to ambiguity. could be low or high. Again, on a continuum, attitude towards team, are they team player or individualist? Again, in the Japanese context, the attitude towards teamwork is very, very high. In fact, individually, they are not very brilliant. They may not be as brilliant as Indians, but collectively, as a team, they do wonders. We may be brilliant as an individuals, but when 10 brilliant people are put together as a team, we may not have the kind of synergy that's expected. So third attribute is, what is your attitude towards teamwork? And the fourth is preference towards simple decision making. Now, normally the preference to simple decision making is very high in Japanese context. That's why they do a detailed planning up to the minute-to-minute planning, up to the lowest level, so that the entire roadmap is fully worked out, so that implementation becomes very easy. Because they enjoy working in a simple algorithmic manner where you put down the steps 1, 2, 3, 4 and do a routine kind of. So every decision is eventually converted into a very simple set of steps to be taken, and their preference to simple decision making is very, very high. That's why they do detailed planning, so that there is no complexity left in the process of implementation. Our preference to simple decision making is low. We normally, because we are brilliant people, and brilliant people, we enjoy solving complex problems. And that's why, once again, it's a great opportunity for India in a VUCA environment, because as brilliant people, we don't enjoy working routine, repetitive problem. Simple, routine, repetitive problems tend to become monotonous and boring to us. And therefore, because we enjoy solving complex problems, because our preference to simple decision making is low. And that's why even simple problems, we ignore to a level where they become extremely complex, and then we solve it and take pride in solving a complex problem. Initially, the problem was so simple that you didn't get its attention because it was so simple. It looks very trivial. And a trivial problem becoming very complex later on, then you enjoy solving a complex problem. And this is the fourth. And therefore, these are, as I mentioned, there are no universal rules. These are 4 ways of characterizing what kind of people that you hire. Their attitude towards authority, their tolerance to ambiguity, their attitude towards teamwork, and their preference towards simple decision making. And therefore, as a result, has to be a combination in uncertain environment. There's VUCA, when I'm immediately in uncertain environment, you require flexible objectives, non-routine technology, informal organization structure with very loose guidelines and not rigid rules and policies, because you can't have a rule for every possible situation. A greater degree of flexibility as a part of a system structure, and the style of people, of I style of people, then the management of style is behavioral. That you have to manage people informally as a teamwork through behavioral style by motivating them. It is the motivational factors and not rigidly scientific quantitative optimization that you need to do it, because that can work in a very structured environment. Now, this is the theory. Now, let me now come to, in a VUCA environment, the leadership, the manager, as you know that the administrator, manager, and leader has evolved. Earlier, what we used to call administrator, a manager is more than an administrator. A leader is manager and administrator. And therefore, a manager has the ability to influence the followers towards the desired change of behaviors and attitudes and performance. And that's the role of a manager, to get things done through people in a system. And therefore, 3 styles. The contingency theory says that the right style of leadership is impacting by what is the profile of the leader, what is the profile of the lad, what kind of students or what kind of faculty are you hiring or you have it, and what is the situation. And therefore, the profile of the leader, the lad, and the situation together comprises the situation, comprises the external environment, which indeed I've just talked about. And therefore, we need to align style with situational variables to ensure that there's no mutual misalignment. For a stable environment, we can have predefined objectives, predictable outcomes, use routine technology, have codified standard structure, have people with teamwork and low tolerance for ambiguity with precision, and the style to lead could be transactional, rational, scientific, rule-based decision-making, heuristics, and all that quantitative orientation will do. However, if the degree of uncertainty is in the external environment is very high, that's the theme for, then a more flexible approach is required in fixing flexible goals, which are possible to be accomplished, non-routine technology, very informal, non-codified organization structure, and a behavioral style of leadership where focus is on motivating people, inspiring them, and therefore an optimal mix of transformational and transactional leadership is required, contingent upon the situation, to improve the efficiency as well as effectiveness. Now, since the current business environment is VUCA, I'll now focus on that first. Now, VUCA, as I mentioned, refers to these four. VUCA is an acronym, is a very popular term to those who are maybe in the management subject, almost a term extensively being used in current times. Now, V refers to volatile, brutal increase in the four dimensions of change: time, scope, time, and the quantum and volume. Huge increase in the dimensions of change in quantum change in time, space, volume, and impact. And there were tremendous change. Almost everything is changing. Uncertain, unable to predict future change. What will happen tomorrow? I don't know. What may happen a year from now? What kind of courses would be in demand 5 years from now? Many times, in fact, the people whom we are training now, those skill sets may not be required by the time they graduate if they're in first year. Therefore, unable to predict future changes in terms of type of change, speed of change, volume of change, and scale. These are four dimensions of change. And therefore, when you're not able to predict what type of change will take place in future, what is the rate at which this change will take place, what is the volume of the change and the scale, and C is complex, widespread confusion with no clarity on cause-effect relationship. In a structured environment, you can develop a cause-effect relationship, but when you are not able to develop a cause-effect relationship, there's a greater degree of fuzziness, and you are not able to know for sure whether this effect is because of that cause or some other cause. It brings a greater degree of complexity. And finally, ambiguous, lack of precision, and existence of multiple meanings within the same condition. In fact, there are multiple interpretations of the same language. There are different ways of interpreting the same thing. There's no precision, and therefore there's greater degree of ambiguity in the business. Now, this is what is known as VUCA environment. Now, the experts in management literature around the globe feel that the current business environment, because of globalization, because of tremendous amount of conflict on resources, conflict because of the external, the climate change, the conflict because of the major shift in the economies, the conflict because of the huge gap between the haves and have-nots. People are dirt rich, people are having actually, and a large number of resources being captured by a very small portion of percentage of society, and a globalization with different national interests taking their own interests further. The globalization has brought in a greater degree of uncertainty in the business world. And therefore, as a result, when changes are ever greater, future is unpredictable and options are increasing exponentially. You have greater number of options because now this is another thing, competition. I have not, for example, if you look at even engineering institution, prior to the 1996, I think that's where perhaps the privatization of engineering education began. The number of colleges and even private universities in the country have almost increased exponentially. So that because of tremendous competitive pressure on institutions, the future is of the future volume of business they are able to do. Business, I'm using it in the right sense, not for profitability, but training the future of this country, the people, the human resources. And therefore, as a result, it's very difficult to predict what kind of skill sets would be required next year. And therefore, your options are increasing and exponential. If you do not offer value for money, somebody else, and that's why today's important, if you have to find out one single objective of a institution, for example, a Hindustan Institute of Technology were to find one single objective which subsumes all other dependent objectives, is to delight your customers better than your competitors do. To delight your competitors better than your competitor do, and we have a larger number of competitors in the system, it becomes a greater challenge how to delight your customers better than your competitors. And therefore, this is one of the major challenge. Leaders must make faster decisions, processing huge amount of data in a highly interconnected world. And therefore, what kind of managers are required in a VUCA world who are able to take very quick decisions, because even strategic decisions have to be taken very fast. Earlier, we could say that strategic decisions, there's no great hurry because that will impact us for all times to come. We should debate it extensively. We still debate should, but even strategic decisions have to be taken. You don't start planning for plan B. You should do detailed planning for just in case, because the environment is just in case. Just in case plan A doesn't work, B, switch over to plan B immediately, switch over to plan C immediately. And therefore, as a result, in a VUCA environment, leaders must make very faster decisions, processing huge amount of data in a highly interconnected. So as I said, the world is a highly interconnected world. Everything affects everything else. In such a highly interconnected world where everything affects everything else, this huge amount of data that's being generated by these transactions, and making use of all this information or data so that you are able to make informed decisions. Why do you need database decision making? You should be able to make informed decisions not based on the right information. As you know, in a decision making process, the quality of information determines the quality of decisions you make. And therefore, if inadequate, imperfect information is fed in, even with the best of intentions and best of tools and models, you'll be able to make imperfect decisions. And therefore, leaders must make quick decisions, processing huge amount of data in a highly interconnected world. We need to work with a different mindset of what's possible rather than what's probable. And therefore, there's a tremendous change in mindset required in working in a VUCA environment. Instead of working on what is possible, rather than what is probable. And therefore, probably is, you are able to predict the outcome with probability. What is possible is think out of box. A different, totally different mindset is required. And one such mindset is flexibility. In fact, this part is perhaps I'm emphasizing today's. If you have a rigid mindset, that means there's only one way of doing things. There's only one way of achieving your goal. That rigidity of mindset is not in tune with the current contemporary environment of working. Because the key word here that every manager must have is a flexibility to switch over a style of managing depending upon the situation. Indeed, in fact, I don't know whether you understand that language. In Hindi we call it desh kal paristhiti. Depending upon the situation, depending upon the condition, situation, time, in the same company, same organization, what you did 10 years back may not work now. What you are working now may not work 5 years from now. And therefore, the flexibility of switchover to new style is one such important characteristic that managers must be trained in. Because after all, in a dynamic situation is evolving. You can't have 10 different types of managers, one for managing during peacetime, one for managing during wartime, one for managing during certainty, another for... Same manager has to have a number of profiles that he or she can change at ease depending upon the situation, so that the management style is in tune with the situation. And therefore, key word is flexibility. And the life of the modern day leaders is more demanding than ever. Obviously, in today's time, managers or leaders who are managing the organization, their job is far more challenging and far more demanding than it was 50 years back or 30 years back or 20 years back. Because 20 years back, the life was relatively stable and the life was predictable. People could know what's going to be happening, and they could take a informed decision. And therefore, today's manager is really, really challenging times, extremely demanding time. Inside the organization, they need to motivate a very diverse group of people. Managing diversity itself is becoming an issue. And therefore, they need to manage the internal stakeholders in terms of motivating. As I said, the only style of management is behavioral, motivating, inspiring people. Only through inspiring people. Because the stick may not work. It is the inspiration. And therefore, my major challenge is how to inspire the kind of people that I have with me. And since I have a diverse group of people with different capabilities, and that's why a good manager is one who is able to produce extraordinary outcome from seemingly ordinary people. That's it. For example, if I simply say that I should have, if a private college say that if a faculty expects the same caliber of students is available in an IIT or an IIM, then this is not true. But then I can motivate my existing group of people, irrespective of their caliber, with the same level of training. And therefore, to me, if a private institution with relatively lower, so-called lower capable of the entry compared to the elite institution, is able to produce and develop and nurture these students to the same level of capability that that an IIT and IIM systems have, then to me, this private institution has contributed more value added to the national development process, because your contribution in nurturing the human resources is far more pronounced, because you took relatively low quality input, relatively, yet nurtured them to the same level of excellence. So your contribution to the society is much more. And therefore, I must respect that college or that institution who, despite a relatively lower rank scholars coming to them, are able to nurture them, develop them to the same level of competence in terms of their global employability as some of the well-known institutions are, because you have given a greater value addition. And therefore, inside your challenge is to motivate diverse group of people with varying capability profile, because all the people that you hire, the entire faculty that you have, all the students that you have may have enormous diversity in terms of their capability, their values, their attitude, their concern for others. And therefore, you need to involve these people and work across organizational boundaries. Beyond the boundary, you need to manage another stakeholders, external scene, and yet improve efficiency and achieve growth. So you are expected to achieve efficiency. You're supposed to achieve growth, because these are important goals of any purpose system. And therefore, expecting a manager to improve efficiency and achieve growth in a VUCA environment and managing internal stakeholders with diversity of aspirations across different subsystems of the departmental within the same department, where even internal coordinating amongst departments is a major issue. And therefore, and yet managing with external, this therefore current managers, present day time leaders, I'm using the word leaders, this applies to an academic institution, the head of the institution in a university or a college. It may apply the managing director of a company, or it could be CEO, because today's time is far more demanding, but the only theory that will help you in the process to achieve your efficiency and goals is contingency theory, and a capability of flexibility of approach and not rigidity of the mindset. Externally, they need to manage a globally competitive environment, manage government departments, government requirements, keep ahead of your competitors. You have to manage ahead of your competitor, because in fact, if your competitor is ahead of you, then perhaps your business would be impacted, because as I said, delighting your customers better than your competitors do becomes your single mool mantra. And imagine if every competitor is having that goal, what a tremendous competitive race it leads to. And that's what's happening. And therefore, as a manager, while you internally manage your diverse group of people and coordinate amongst various departments who may not really be thinking in the same tune, your left hand may not know what right hand is doing. Your electrical department may not be interacting with mechanical, and vice versa. Your management department may not be impacting all other engineering departments. And therefore, while internally you need to manage them, externally you need to manage a globally competitive environment, which involves the government departments, the legislations, the rules, policies, keep ahead of competitors, exceed stakeholders' aspiration. For example, employers, parents, in case of academic institution, a customer in the case of the general products and services. So you need to exceed the stakeholders, because I use the word customer delight. Now, there's a difference between customer satisfaction and customer delight. In today's competitive world, customer satisfaction will not do. Because the term satisfaction seems to be a neutral term. For example, in academic institutions, normally, I don't know whether you have that scheme here, the satisfactory grade is called a C grade. So if a student gets a C grade, you call it satisfactory grade. But not many people get satisfied with the satisfactory grade. So the word satisfactory, customer satisfaction, is a very neutral term and no longer as relevant as. So what you require? You require customer delight or customer experience. That's a new term coming up. So what's customer delight? There's a Kano's model of customer delight. What it says, there are certain expected outcomes that a customer expects from you. If you do not even fulfill those expected needs or explicit needs, which are known, explicit needs, implicit needs, and even unexpected needs. There are 3 types of needs of customers. Expected needs is what is expected of you. For example, as a college, you are expected to teach well. You're expected to nurture them in terms of their employability. You're expected to hold classes on time. You're expected to do hand-holding. You are expected to do a good quality teaching, learning, and evaluation process. Now, these are expected requirements of a college. Implicit needs are those which are required but are not stated explicitly. Now, for example, when a teacher is taking a class, it's expected that he's taking a class. Now, expected would be that he'll come on time, deliver the course content, but it's implicitly expected of a teacher to be compassionate, to be fair, to be judicious, to be impartial, to be courteous, to be empathetic to the student, to be concerned about them, and to be courteous. Now, courtesy in many service systems may not be when somebody goes to a service center, you expect the job to be done, but courtesy is an implicit need. So if a counter clerk is not very courteous with you, he's doing a job. Because you're gone with a complaint, you're gone with a grievance, but he doesn't handle you with courtesy. Now, courtesy is an implicit need. And third is, so if you do explicit need and implicit needs, it leads to customer satisfaction. If you don't even have explicit needs fulfilled, it leads to dissatisfaction. So not doing what you are expected to do leads to dissatisfaction. Doing what you are expected to do, both implicitly and explicitly, leads to satisfaction. But what is customer delight? Delight is giving to the customer something that he or she didn't even expect. And therefore, today's world requires for customer delight. Now, for example, how do I further elucidate by giving an example of how do I distinguish customer delight from customer satisfaction? Suppose you hire a taxi or a cab. You expect him to charge you, take you from the lowest route, charge you at the rate is all expected. Implicitly, you also expect the cab to be clean and fairly well maintained. It's again expected. But suppose a person comes with a very high degree of courtesy as a driver, very, very cultured person, extremely disciplined, very modest and courteous, and very well-maintained taxi, and follows the route, the lowest cost route, charges you. But then in addition, he asks you, sir, which kind of music you'd want me to play. He carries few newspapers in the cab. He carries a bottle of mineral water without charging you. He gives you minor expect. Now, this is what now the beauty of customer delight is that it's just a little extra. It doesn't require a huge, and this is what would make a difference. If you're able to offer to your customers something extra which he didn't expect, that may not cost you a fortune, but will lead to a tremendous change in the customer delight. And today's business would go into the hands of those people who are able to offer that little extra which is not expected, but if you offer it, it delights you, because anything unexpected. Therefore, as a result, and therefore, in order to survive in a highly global world, we need to focus on exceeding stakeholders' aspirations and navigate in a culturally sensitive global world. For example, that's another important thing. To be effective in leading people, you have to be sensitive in their cultural sensitivity. People have different values, different sensitivity towards their cultural faith, their language, their faith, their mode of worship. And you need to respect that individual sensitivity and therefore aspiration, expectation, and particularly when you're having a diverse group of, for example, you have foreign students studying in a college from different countries coming, different languages, people from in the same state, country, people using different languages and their separate subculture. As an institution, you have to be sensitive and navigate very smoothly in a culturally sensitive global world to effective leading people who are not only different in habits and attitudes, but also different on ways of getting things done. People with different habits and attitudes who constitute a diverse. So managing diversity is one of the important ingredients of working in a VUCA environment, because people who constitute your workforce have different habits, different attitudes, and are different ways of getting things done. Somebody prefers to work alone, an individual. Best in him comes out when he's individual. In some of the best in them comes out when they work in a group, and this is what makes the complex world of business today. Disruptive innovative capability, therefore, is mandatory. So what you need as a manager, you require disruptive innovative capability, that you should be able to think out of the box. In this world of beaten track, whatever you are doing in the past, you require disruptive innovative capability, and therefore for growth and protection, you require a capacity to think out of the box. Leapfrog by being liberal, exuberant, agile, and work on trust-based partners. So what's critical, which unfortunately may not be true here, we have to trust people. The partnership based on trust. Agility is keyword, resilience. And agility is the keyword in VUCA environment, where I'm able to switch over with ease a new way of working. For example, I have, and I graduated from IIT Kharagpur in 1966 in mechanical engineering. And many things I never studied are now so your capacity to learn, relearn, or learn, so that you're able to switch over to new style of working. I never imagined during Corona times I'll be working online. I'm used as a teacher to speaking to people whom I can see their faces. Here I'm speaking to people who I'm not able to see at all. Yet I'm able to continue my presentation, and that capacity to be agile. Agile is into sync with the situation, to be in congruence with the situation, and work on trust-based partnerships. Without partnerships with people, stakeholders, based on trust, mutual collegial confidence, you cannot plan on long-term basis in a foggy environment. There's another thing. Now, long-term planning is outdated in a VUCA environment. It's gone at the time when you can plan for next 10 years. A college, a university, an institution, a government department cannot, or even in a private sector, you cannot say what kind of product you will make, what kind of skill set will be in demand. The external environment being foggy. Fog is a term used for where you can't see you can't see beyond a mile, beyond a kilometer, beyond 100 meter. So when the external environment of doing business is not very clean, in a foggy environment, long-term planning is not feasible. And therefore, an approach towards planning as a managerial function would have to be that while you might have a vision in mind, the vision, you're able to capacity to think clearly in a foggy weather. So that capacity, that kind of vision, the eyes, that you know your main goal, but the rate of change is a critical decision. Indeed, the rate of change is the critical decision for success. And this indeed, I would like to suggest that in case you don't change at all, you'll be out of business. But if you change too fast, A too fast a change in policy or too slow a change, both are hurtful. And therefore, as an effective manager, you have to make a critical decision at what rate of change you will switch over to the new. If the rate of change being the critical, in fact, those of you might have studied system dynamics modeling. In system dynamics modeling, the only policy decision variable is the rate of change, because a change is inevitable. But what determines success and failure is the rate of change. If you change at a rate which the system can absorb, the various subsystems can absorb the change would lead to consequences which are desirable. But if we change at a rate which the system cannot absorb, the various stakeholders cannot absorb, the subsystems cannot absorb, then the too fast a change can also lead to a well thought out policy, but the rate at which you implemented it without looking into the details of the implementation change, and therefore many times in well-intentioned policies, if change very suddenly, do not lead to desired consequences, because too fast a change or too slow a change, both are not conducive for effective management. And hence, in this environment, depending upon the rate of change in the environment, depending upon the degree of fog in the external environment of doing business, how uncertainty, you should determine the rate of change, and therefore the rate of change becomes the most critical decision variable. And if you're able to change at a rate which is manageable, you'll succeed. But if you change at a rate which is not manageable, it's too fast a change is therefore as injurious as too slow a change. Both are, and that's why you require an optimal degree of change contingent upon the situation. Ask different types of questions. Take on multiple perspective. Do what if kind of scenario. If suppose only one thing may not happen. What if this happens? So what kind of the analytic ability as managers you should have? You should be able to think, what if kind of experimentation? What happens if I do this? What happens if I do this? So scenario building, developing an alternative scenarios, taking multiple perspectives. Start thinking from perspective A, start thinking from perspective B, start thinking perspective C. Ask multiple questions. The capacity to ask intelligent questions is one of the important attributes of a good learner. And a good organization would encourage people to ask intelligent questions. And if I can, as a teacher, inculcate in my students the capacity to ask intelligent questions, I've done the work. Because it is today's world is not giving information. Information can be obtained from Google or whatever sources or YouTube or wherever. But capacity to ask questions so that you get right answers. And therefore, that's the kind. And therefore, today's learning requirement from students is not to give them huge amount of information or information overload. It is developing in them the capacity to learn, relearn, or learn, and ask intelligent questions. If you're able to inculcate that profile and develop a positive attitude amongst them, so that they can find solutions to every problem, I think that's the kind of expectations we have from academic institutions to make them globally employable. And therefore, develop a systematic vision. Look at the total picture, holistic picture, and take a step back to see what's possible. And therefore, our entire approach has to be do what is possible in a given situation. And this way, possibility theory more than probability theory would work in the VUCA environment. And therefore, one very important, what kind of manager you should have in the system. If you have managed exponential growth and exponential decay, then you have faced both sides of. Now, in fact, this must be happening now. Technical education experience in exponential growth. If you look at, in fact, they have, even some other theme when you talk of quality of technical education. We have, in fact, since 1947, the number of institutions and the enrollment in technical education has seen an exponential growth, but it's now seeing an exponential decay. And therefore, you know that if you have, as a manager, have managed the exponential growth very well, so that you did not grow mindlessly during the period of exponential growth, you had an optimal degree of growth in a goal-seeking behavior, that you only expanded your departmental seats, which you could manage well, which could train well, and did not increase a large number of seats under various alternative names of computer science or engineering, just to increase the number. Those people have managed the exponential growth logically in a goal-seeking behavior, or those who are managing exponential decay. Because during these two extreme conditions, talent crunch, in case of exponential growth, you don't have the faculty. You have students but not enough faculty to teach. You don't have capable faculty to teach, and you have students who are a large number. Extreme industrial relations problem, we need to retrench people because there are no admissions, so faculty have to be laid off. This causes stress. And if you have proved yourself as a manager of the system during these two extremes of exponential decay and exponential growth, perhaps you have gone through the kinds of pains the system inflicts on the situation, and you're able to manage it effectively because you have proved yourself in a worst case scenario, and hence are very capable of equipped to handle any kind of VUCA environment. That's the kind of situation. Now, therefore, the kind of, as I said, the key word here is the rate of change. The smartest leaders cope with the constant change as follows. For example, since you need to be ready to change, but the rate of change is the critical success factor. Extreme change can be catastrophic. No change can be catastrophic. I'm again emphasizing this because many times people think that you can be, change in a quantum jump. The higher quantum jump can lead to tremendous, very injurious outcomes too. Therefore, some of the smartest leaders will cope with the change as follows. Every rule you know is subject to change. Now, rules are meant to facilitate functioning. No rule should be seen as sacrosanct. In fact, every rule is supposed to make the functioning simple, structured, and enables you to achieve your goals with a greater degree of ease. And therefore, rules which were earlier good for a different situation may no longer be relevant, and therefore you should be willing to debate on changing the policies and rules that existed earlier. For example, in a VUCA environment, a rigid attendance rule, United system, I teach in IIT Delhi as well even now, there's no attendance rule in IIT Delhi in an online class, because how do I know whom the person whom I am addressing is physically present? He may have been logged in and muted himself and switch off the camera. So when I cannot even know who are attending my lectures, insisting on 75% attendance, perhaps it may not be a very rigid rule. So therefore, depending upon the situation, rules are to be interpreted as something meant for facilitating your work, for helping people, bringing consistency in your functioning, and facilitate you to get to the goal. And therefore, if rule requires a revision, if policy change requires a revision, you should be willing to do so, because that rule which worked earlier may not work now. And therefore, rigidity in following a rule which has become outdated in a current situation perhaps may lead to some problems. And therefore, every rule that you know is subject to change. You can modify, you can redefine, because that's meant for facilitating the situation rather than, and therefore the objective should be to attain your goal, and rule is a means to do so. If you follow the rule but you miss the goal, the purpose is defeated. There's no sure formula for success. There's no single way. That's what the whole thesis is. There's no single best way of managing, and therefore there's no surefire formula for success. Yeah, I can't give you, do this, you'll always succeed. There could be some golden rules, like it's good to be compassionate, it's good to be empathetic to others, it's good to have a balanced concern for self and others, it's good not to be selfish, it's good to be team player, it's good to be positive. All these are things, these are prerequisites, but there is no sure short formula of success. You need to evolve. Your expertise, your education, and experience are not as valuable as you think. Sometimes whatever you studied in your college doesn't come to your help. Your education doesn't come to your help. Maybe your common sense, a robust common sense helps you. Maybe your values help you. Maybe your kind of the way you have been brought up. And therefore, Your experience, your education expertise may not be as valuable as you think, because some of these may not work in certain situations. Now, every obstacle that you, in fact, is a very common term now, finding an opportunity in an adversity. Every adverse situation makes you wiser, smarter, and therefore treat every limit. If you've done SWOT analysis, every weakness of the system that you have can be perceived as an opportunity to improve. If you don't even accept a weakness as a weakness, there's no way you can improve. Because the moment you look at every opportunity as an agenda, for every weakness as an opportunity for agenda, you have the capacity to convert weakness into an opportunity. And therefore, in today's VUCA-driven environment, managers need to have the capacity to convert a weakness into an opportunity to rethink, to reconfigure, to redesign. And therefore, every possible obstacle is a chance to get smarter, to chance to become wiser. Every weakness is an agenda for improvement. And therefore, don't put weakness in under the carpet, which we have the tendency to do. Many times, my own experience has been, if we ask organized colleges to do self-assessment, and many of these ranking tools require self-assessment. When I was Vice Chancellor of UP Technical University, I introduced the UP Technical University Academic Excellence Award model. We first initially asked the organized colleges to fill up self-assessment. Now, my experience was that in most cases, colleges overestimate their strength and underplay their weaknesses. It's the surest way of declining. I must tell you, a great institution is one who admits a weakness openly, and wholeheartedly, because every weakness is an opportunity to improve. Your weakness becomes your development agenda, your improvement agenda, and you don't even accept a weakness as a weakness. There is no way of improving. And hence, we must accept a weakness wholeheartedly and treat that as an agenda. As you know, the theory of constraints, if some of you might have heard Goldratt's theory, a theory of constraints says that if you take your weakest point, agenda first for improvement, then your rate of improvement would be fastest, because the weakest link, if you address the weakest link, it has the greatest opportunity to lead to better outcomes. So therefore, identify a weakest link in your system and address that weakest link. For example, in my perception, in many of the private colleges, particularly in the far-flung areas, the weakest link is to attract a talented, motivated, inspired faculty. So faculty becomes a critical weakness area. The focus on attracting the best and the brightest brains who are motivated to your faculty, because by doing so, you're overcoming the biggest constraint, and therefore treat every weakness as an opportunity to improve, every obstacle that you face as a chance to get smarter, and never stop asking why not. Why you're doing it is why not. Answer roadblocks for great, whatever roadblocks you come across and resistance that you have, you should be able to say how to. Now, therefore, major leadership challenges in India are developing managerial effectiveness. We may be rule-based people. We develop systems and policies which may be efficient but not effective. We may be completing a project in time, within cost and the quality, but we are taking for example, if I take a flyover, and that's why there is a kind of sometimes a thinking that many times you keep on adding flyover in a metropolis, but the traffic congestion still remains the same. You take the same timing, because we have shifted the location of the congestion, because maybe I was efficient in managing project, but made a flyover at a wrong place, in wrong direction. I'm very efficient in teaching students very well, very good teaching, but I'm teaching a course which is not in demand, which employers don't look for it. So therefore, developing managerial effectiveness is how to get the right things done, how to do things right in a right way. So efficiency and effectiveness not are trade-offs. A good manager has to be efficient as well as effective. You are efficient as well as effective. Developing employees, one of the weakest link. As you know that if I adopted the Western curriculum or the Japanese style of management, unless I develop my employees with the same kind of values and attitudes and personality disposition, so constantly developing employees should be one of the important challenges, because right now our employees profile may be so different from those whom we are competing with the external world. And if India has to become vocally local, our local products have to become globally competitive. I have to offer value for money. That means a better quality at a lower cost. Then that's the only way I can become Atmanirbhar Bharat. And therefore, for doing so, we need to develop, nurture our employees. Every employee has enormous hidden potential. And to me, as I said again, that getting an outstanding work from seemingly ordinary people can become an extremely important leadership challenge, but it's feasible, it's doable. And therefore, developing and nurturing employees, the idea is controlling is not an objective, developing. Now, and in fact, the difference between controlling employees and filtering approach, there are two ways of developing people. One is filtering approach. You need a manager, you interview 10 people, select the best one. There's a filtering approach. Developing is the remaining 9 also needs to be developed. And therefore, in any organization, you'll find 10% people are outstanding, let's say. But you simply cannot count on only those 10% outstanding people. If the remaining 90% people are also nurtured and developed at the same level, then imagine the kind of the scale at which you can rise. And therefore, don't simply start nurturing a very selective group. It's our job to develop everyone. And by nurturing and developing employees, you need to feel committed. And therefore, guiding change. Change cannot be simply by way of defined change. Okay, you need to be as a manager, be a participant in the process of guiding change. How to change to the new. Inspiring others is an extremely important job of a great manager. Now, the word inspiration calls for, in fact, I used a formula. I don't know whether, it's perhaps not here. Right? Now, excellence is motivation into commitment square. Now, if you're inspiring, intend to inspire your students as a teacher himself or herself has to be inspired. A laid-back approach, an uninspired teacher is unlikely to inspire others, students and other teachers. An uninspired manager, an uninspired leader is unlikely to inspire the followers. And therefore, in order to inspire others, you yourself have to be in the highest state of inspiration, absolutely passionate, committed, and inspired. Only then you can do it. So become a role model, a playing captain. Leading a team. In today's VUCA world, teamwork alone would deliver result, because the different facets of a situation. Now, what is a team? Team is together, everyone achieves more. All members of the team may not have same capabilities, same skills, but use their complementarity. Somebody is good in presentation, somebody is good in thinking, somebody is good in analysis, somebody is good in PR. You require all those skill sets. And therefore, giving the right skill, right assignment of responsibility to the team. So the best in people should come out so that together everyone achieves more. And leading a team becomes an important challenge. And today, as I mentioned, by nature, we are not team players. And therefore, you have to struggle hard to inculcate a feeling of teamwork in an organization. Because by nature, we are individualists. We are utmost concerned for self and really less concern for others. And if you have that kind of value system, that high concern for self and low concern for others, you are unlikely to be a team player. And the challenge is how to develop people with relatively high concern for self and low concern for others, how to make them team player. It's a very major challenge, but it's needed, it's required if we want to become globally competitive. And managing internal stakeholders and internal politics. And the word politics is a term which is used in general sense here. When you had a number of different people with different aspiration level, set, some kind of internal conflict may occur. Now, certain degree of conflict might be conducive for progress. certain degree of stress may be conducive for good performance. Because otherwise, if everybody becomes complacent, there is no challenge. But if a stress goes beyond a point, it becomes counterproductive. And therefore, how to manage an optimal degree of aspirations of internals. Now I'm now coming to how the Indians are better suited to manage in a VUCA environment. Now, as you know, that since I gave you that profile earlier, in general, we have very high tolerance to ambiguity. Very, very high tolerance to ambiguity. Almost on anything. And that's why if you even look at in the computational world, now deterministic optimization models are now getting outdated. Now, for example, linear programming as an optimization tool is perhaps outdated because it assumes determinism. It assumes that the costs are constant and known. It assumes that the resource position given are known. And it assumes that the profit per unit or cost per unit is known and known. Now, where does such a deterministic world of business exist today? And therefore, those deterministic models of decision making in operation, research, and management science, which believe in complete information is known and given, is outdated. So, if you look at, some of you are working in the area of decision science, you know that a major emerging paradigm in the development of newer models in decision making is to how to manage under multiple criterion. Single criterion decision making is outdated. When you make a decision, there are multiplicity of criteria. There are criterion which are conflicted with each other. They're at loggerheads, and yet you must manage. There are organizational departments having conflict of interest. Now, how to manage people with different conflict of interest by reconciling the individual various expectations. And therefore, for that, the newer kinds of management decision-making tools that are emerging now, the single criterion optimization is almost outdated. That's why you see multiple criterion optimization, MCDM, because almost every decision has multiple perspectives to be kept in mind while deciding. Similarly, deterministic decision is giving way to more fuzzy, those of you the fuzzy algorithms are coming more and more. Fuzzy goal programming, fuzzy linear programming, fuzzy means bringing a greater degree of imprecision. Now, imprecision, vagueness of the information is the key word in today's VUCA environment, and therefore, obviously, even management decision-making tools like fuzzy algorithms, fuzzy computational methods, multi-criterion decision-making tools, they're emerging now because conventionally deterministic single criterion tools such as linear programming are now getting outdated. And therefore, since as Indians we have relatively high tolerance to ambiguity, today's business environment is ambiguous. So perhaps I'm better suited to manage this environment. I see this style of managers amongst us as a positive skill set because in a developed world, people are trained to work in a structured environment. Imagine, for example, I'm saying it in a lighter vein. If you come to Delhi, or maybe in any other city, perhaps the traffic behavior in every city makes us one. We almost say same behavior. Now look at complex, driving behavior on roads with all that, moving from left and right with no lane discipline, with no speed limits, and almost occupying every available square inch of space on the road and being the first one to move ahead of it, almost overtaking. If suppose and yet the greatness is that, and yet with all that confusion, I'm able to steer through to reach my destination maybe a few minutes late. Now, such a tremendous capacity to absorb ambiguity, confusion, and yet come out of that confusion. If suppose, in a highly structured society, let's say, give the example of a Japanese driver. If a person developed in in driving on Japanese structured road conditions, following rules and rules of the game, and concern for others, not violating lane discipline. If he was to drive on Indian roads, perhaps on day one it will be a huge accident. And therefore, this is a strength that in such a confusion, I'm able to steer my way through. Let's make use of that strength in dovetailing with the current VUCA environment, because I perhaps can manage that confusion far more effectively because I'm used to that confusion. And this confusion does not unnerve me because I've seen every day. And therefore, the kind of high tolerance and ambiguity perhaps can be a boon to us. And that's why in many, I don't know whether it's a chance or that some of the top leadership positions globally are now coming to Indians. You have the chief of the Microsoft from India, a chief of Google from India, IIT Kharagpur, and many more. Perhaps that capacity to manage ambiguity and confusion and volatility in the environment comes naturally to us, because all through our life we have been struggling with shortages, making queues, finding a way out with limited resources, and therefore this high tolerance for ambiguity, very high on integrity, complexity. As I mentioned, we don't enjoy simple problem solving. If I ask you to carry out the same iterative procedure following, for example, linear programming, simplex algorithm, linear programming is repetitive. Iterative procedure, you follow first iteration, second iteration, third iteration. You say, oh, what is this? So simple, structured, simple decisions do not impress us. We enjoy solving complex problems. Fortunately, the complexity of the world has given the VUCA environment has made our business highly complex. And since we are high on what is known as integrative complexity. We don't enjoy simple, structured problem solving. We want to solve complex problems, and that's why simple problems are ignored till they become complex, and then take great pride in solving them. We prefer to work in challenging mode. Life becomes more, the best in you comes out in a crisis mode. You become extremely innovative so you prefer to work in a challenging mode. Best in us comes out under crisis. A stable life appears boring. If life is stable, the stable life tends to, it's very, very, very unusual, but that's true. We have a crisis-driven mindset. For example, we don't recognize a problem unless a crisis erupts. Not proactive, but we are reactive. And therefore, you can be proactive, but if the situation is VUCA, you have to react to that situation immediately. So both proactive approach may not work all the time. And therefore, since we are more reactive, so we need to quickly react to a new emerging paradigm and switch over to new guard. And therefore, there's not much proactive action possible in a VUCA environment. If I can't take a preventive action because I don't know what's going to happen. And therefore, this reactive approach, a crisis-driven mindset, taking challenging roles, perhaps are some of the skill sets that we have, and I can see these as a positive opportunity in ruling in a VUCA world. And that's why I perhaps feel that of course, there are certain, you have to have capability. There are many things. It's not that just by virtue of these, you will get it. You need to follow a determined discipline. Certain characteristics which are non-negotiable as a leader have to be done. And a tremendous passion and drive to achieve your goal. And therefore, hence, quick reactive response to a developing situation, which is important. Quickly reacting to a new situation, updating what you did earlier, you change your, quick updation. And so that quick response, this is what is known as resilience and agility. In today's world, resilience and agility to quickly switch over. And therefore, quick response, reactive response to a developing situation is becoming important. And therefore, what's important, that we should channelize these traits, incentivize individuals. For example, as you know, if I'm a member of the team, I know that the entire team will be recognized, but not my individual contribution. But since individual in me is more prominent than the team in me, you have to also develop systems of incentivizing individuals so that they feel committed to the cause for which they are working. The enormous potential they'll contribute if they know what is in it for me. And therefore, individual incentivization is far more stronger than at group incentivization. In a group, everybody will get the benefit. So we'll say, why should I work here? Because by nature, we are not cut out for teamwork. Empower, anticipate, even more flexible. We need to empower people. I cannot know answers to every problem. So do not expect people to come to you for unless you empower people to struggle with that objective, that problem. So by empowering people, because one thing you must understand, that the real solution to the problems arise at the level those problems arrive. And therefore, if I empower my employees to find solutions to those problems at their own level, in fact, I'll be able to solve more problems. And this is the essence of quality circle in Japanese context. So empower people. Don't expect, and which requires delegation of authority. I must delegate power down the line. Empower my people. Because centralization of authority would not work in current times. Delegating authority, empowering your lowest level employee to find solution to the problem, because solution to the problems reside at the level problems arise. And therefore, you need to anticipate, more anticipative, what's going to happen, futuristic, and very flexible. And therefore, because of these characteristics, we can safely drive through confusion, provided I'm inspired and motivated to reach my goal. So I'm able to, if I want to reach my goal on time, I'm able to drive through that confusion, which is miraculous. In fact, in Indian, I often say in a lighter vein, if somebody can successfully drive in Indian roads, he or she should get international license without any further testing, because you have proved yourself through the worst case scenario. But you need to be inspired and motivated. And leaders should inspire. In order to inspire leaders for excellence, this is a formula that I often have been using, just to say that indifference and excellence do not, in fact, this is, those of you who would very straightway know, it's a classical Einsteinian formula. In Einstein's formula, E is, energy, M is mass, C is velocity of light. Of course, it has nothing to do with that formula. In a management, if you want to inspire people to achieve excellence, in this formula, excellence is excellence, M is motivation, and C is commitment. So, excellence of an organization, of an individual, is motivation and commitment square. Now, motivation is what you do. You have, for example, I am addressing this to teachers, let's say. If you want to be an excellent teacher, you have to be committed to teaching profession. And therefore, you might have been motivated to be a teacher. That's what makes you a teacher. You're motivated. You came in. So motivation tells you what you do. Commitment tells you how well you do that. And therefore, in order to emphasize that point, I made this E is equal to MC square. Suppose, the reason is those of you maybe in a scientific and engineering discipline understand quantitative better than qualitative. So suppose, just to illustrate that point, although it doesn't need to, I can't prove it. Suppose you're doing a job half-heartedly. Your commitment is 0.5. You're doing the job half. You're a teacher, but you're not enjoying teaching because your heart is not in the teaching. So you're doing a job half-heartedly because that's not your preferred choice. Your commitment is half, 0.5. Your E would be 1/4. But suppose you're passionate as a teacher. You take teaching not as making a living, as a process to nation building. As a teacher, you know that you're doing a great nation building because the kind of future generations would remember you for a great contribution you're making to the society. You're passionate, you have a zeal, enthusiasm, and passion in doing what you're doing. Your C becomes 2. Your E becomes 4. So therefore, the corollary of this is that excellence and indifference don't coexist. If you want excellence as an outcome, you have to be doubly enthused, you have to be passionate, you have to have the zeal. And with the passion and zeal to perform, you enjoy your work, you love your work, you're passionate in doing that work, then excellence cannot be denied to you. You're bound, they're designed for excellence, we are passionate you have the zeal to do what you're doing, irrespective of what you're doing. It doesn't matter what you do. We do it with passion and zeal. Excellence is bound to come. But if you do that job half-heartedly, you're laid back. That's not a job. That's not the kind of job you're looking for. I don't enjoy that job. You're half-hearted, laid back, indifferent. And the corollary therefore is indifference and excellence do not coexist. If you're indifferent in doing that job, you cannot never be excellent, because indifference and excellence, and it's a job of a leader to inspire his followers, and the leader himself or herself has to follow this principle. And therefore, we expect managers to be themselves inspired, passionate, with a zeal to achieve what you're doing. Focus on a specific skill prioritization. For example, prioritize, for example, the different kind of skills, time management and decision making. Now, what kind of skill set is required for a particular situation? I need to develop that skill. For example, in a service sector, and in fact, there's another research that I'm currently engaged in. I found that in a service sector, the biggest single quality that a prerequisite for improving the quality of service is the quality of people that I have. If you have and therefore a corollary of that I'm in fact working on is, before I can think of improving the quality of products and services that I offer, I need to improve the quality of people that I have. And therefore, improving the skills and quality of the people that you have. And in that context, you see this faculty development workshop. Because unless you have the right skill sets of the faculty and the right passion and motivation in them, any curriculum that you design, because the curriculum is as good as delivered in classroom. And therefore, we need to focus on the right kind of skills faculty should have in this context, and hence the relevance of faculty development workshop. And in that process, managing time management has become, time management is really one of the weakest link that we have in India. Sometimes if you're punctual, you're on time, and unfortunately I happen to belong that category as a self-imposed discipline on me. I'm always ahead of my time, and many times I wait in the classroom, I wait in the committee for people to assemble, I wait in the meetings to begin, I wait for a session to begin. But then that's a self-imposed discipline, and hence, to me, time management is one feature that managers should imbibe in them, because time is something which is not renewable. Whatever time I have lost. No amount of money can get that time back. Secondly, very simple. Time is one performance measure which is easy to measure. Everybody has a clock or a smartphone. You know what is time. It's universally understood. There is no ambiguity about time. Time is almost a deterministic parameter. And therefore, if a person cannot manage time, which is 100% easily measurable, single criterion, non-renewable resource, and therefore, if I can't manage time, it's unlikely that I can manage anything more complex. Hence, time management is an important skill set that we should have in us. And good decision making. Flexible goal setting. Now, flexible, but goals have to be smart. Now, SMART is again an acronym. It's a very important goal setting. It's a very important part of SMART goal setting. SMART is specific. Unless my goals are specific, I cannot monitor them. So be specific. Specific means measurable. Measurable either in terms of the or even in terms of, so anything that you cannot measure, you cannot manage. So specific, measurable, attainable. I mean, if I set a goal which is not attainable, it has no meaning. Many times we tend to attain a goal which is not met. So the goal must be attainable, otherwise people lose interest in it. And R is relevant. A goal which is relevant to your major business, and T is time-based. Now you can't make a goal which has no time frame. You therefore have set the time in next month or next year, by next 6 months, by next 1 year, by next 5 years. So when you set goals, have them flexible, because rigid goal setting is out of sync in the VUCA environment. But these goals should be smart, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. In doing so, delegate more. delegate your powers down the line. Inspiring others, leading a team, developing employees are all relationship-centered leadership tasks. And therefore, as I mentioned, in a VUCA environment, your quantitative orientation would be there, numbers are needed, data is needed, but the decision-making again is more fuzzy than deterministic. But the biggest single skill set you require is relationship skill. Indeed, and I read somewhere that there's a 75-year-long study conducted by Harvard or groups related to them to find out one single skill set that's important for success. And generations of people who have been trained and worked. And what finally comes out is that one biggest single skill set that you require for succeeding in life is relationship skill. Because if you have good relationship with your colleagues, your bosses, your stakeholders, your people, they can come together to find solutions to the problem. The small mistakes here and there would not be magnified because your good relationship. And therefore, minor errors of commissions and omissions can be easily excused and tolerated and encouraged. But if you have poor relationship with your colleagues, with your bosses, with your students, with other stakeholders, even smaller mix-up and smaller limitations are magnified. Smaller errors are made to look big. And therefore, this 75-year-old study conducted, a series of generations, 3-4 generations have passed, that one single time-tested skill that managers should have in them is good relationship. And that's why in VUCA environment, a relationship-centered leadership task is extremely important. There is, and therefore we develop positive relationship with your colleagues, with your class. A teacher must relate, empathize with the class, with the students. A faculty, a principal or a vice chancellor must relate with faculty, employees and students and the stakeholders, and developing that relationship-centered skill set. And genuine, you can't fake relationship. You can't wear a mask of relationship. A genuine relationship would unfold itself very quickly. How empathetic, how concerned, how caring you are, and therefore relationship-centered leadership task is important. There is no substitute of leaders' credibility amongst the lad. This is extreme. Now, this is one sub, irrespective of VUCA or no VUCA. The leader's own credibility amongst lad is extremely important prerequisite. If your subordinates believe in you that whatever you have promised will be done, your credibility becomes your biggest asset as a manager in a VUCA environment. That you said so and it will be done. And therefore, under-promise but over-deliver. Therefore, if you over-promise and under-deliver, people will soon get disillusion. So under-promise but over-deliver, because there is no substitute of leaders' credibility amongst the lad. And a wide range of acceptance of the leader by followers is needed for effectiveness. Therefore, what is wide? It's called an acceptance range of, for example, if between leader and lad, between manager and subordinate, between faculty and students, between principal and faculty, the leader and lad relationship, or a manager and the worker in a factory setting, the entire spectrum. If the employees have a higher acceptance range of the manager or a principal, or that they would accept whatever is being said without being questioned, because you carried a credibility amongst you that you said something, you lived by that promise, you lived by that word. And therefore, any manager who has a wider range of acceptance by the followers can succeed, can be effective. And that's why I mentioned that in the Japanese context, the people naturally have that wider, they will always accept what the manager says. In fact, when I was teaching in Thailand as AICTE, as introduced as professor and division of chairman Asian Institute of Technology, Bangkok, I found that this has people from 30 different countries in classroom. Now, Thai students would generally be very quiet in the classroom. One Thai student came to my room after the class and asked me a question. And I asked him, why didn't you ask this question in the class so that others could have also benefited? He said, no, sir. No, sir. In our culture, questioning a teacher in a classroom is considered something bad because our culture tells you the teacher is always right. This way they call achan, and they respect a teacher in a big way. So to me, if a person in a classroom, and although I'm not necessarily saying it's a great, because classrooms are meant for questioning, debate, and questioning a teacher does not mean your disrespect for him, because without questioning, innovation, creativity doesn't come. I'm simply saying that there's a certain culture where the wide range of acceptance of a leader automatically comes, irrespective, because they say if you are a manager, you must be right. If you are a boss, you must be right. But in a VUCA environment with different stakeholders, even there you can have wider range of acceptance if you are a competent person. The leader is competent, fair, integrity, credibility, promises are delivered, and is fair amongst perceived fairness amongst people, and is a role model. He himself does what he preaches to others. It's for that spirit that for, in fact, last 54 years, irrespective of the levels I've held almost every portfolio in IIT Delhi and Roorkee as director and now chairman, in a vice chancellor, pro chancellor. I have continued to remain a teacher myself. Now I teach a course here. I teach in IIT Delhi. I'm teaching under AICTE at this age, because if I can only preach to others if I can myself teach well, and therefore, in order to develop that credibility, you need to be a role model, a playing captain. And therefore, in my opinion, in VUCA world, we need to be an ideal Indian, a 9-9 manager on managerial grade of Robert Blake, high on performance and high on relationship. So why we, because generally that, this myth is broken that if you ask people to work, they will be demotivated. No, it's possible for people to be asked, it's possible for you to be high taskmaster, and yet people are happy with you because they know that you yourself are caring for people, and you yourself are putting yourself to high tasks yourself, and you are a performer. And an ideal Indian, a 9-9 manager and managerial grade is high on performance and high on relationship, so that your people are very happy with you. Your students are very happy. If you are a principal, your students are very happy with you. Your faculty is very happy with you. Your administration is happy with you. Your promoters are happy with you, and your government is happy with you. Your employers are happy with you. Your parents are happy with you, because you're built in relationship. Simply relationship alone will not do. Relationship becomes a kind of an enabler to perform, because with goodwill and good relationship, people would contribute and you perform. So performance and relationship are not trade-offs. It's not that you only talk about relationship and not performance, or you only talk of performance and not relationship. Those are two extremes of in the managerial grid of those, if you might be aware of the managerial grid of concern for work and concern for people. So you ought to develop a high concern for performance, 9-9 manager, so that we are able to deliver high performance without eroding relationship amongst colleagues and customers. And if that can be done, that's what I mean by effectiveness. And therefore, in this process, leaders need to be sensitive to employees' emotions and show empathy, concern for others. In fact, as I mentioned, that one of the major distortions that we have is utmost concern for self and look. We need to change this. To me, is the root cause of major relationships. Show empathy towards others, employees, towards students, towards others, towards employers. Proactively reduce uncertainty. That while it's true that in a VUCA world we are designed to succeed, but the fact remains that the VUCA world has, if I say in a philosophical tone, for every constraint under which you work, you pay the price. So it's true that you can manage under uncertainty, but working under uncertainty does impact on your performance. For every uncertainty, there is a price to pay. So proactively, while you manage uncertainty, but does not mean that you do not become proactively to reduce uncertainty, make whatever effort is possible in planning, although full planning is not possible in a foggy environment, but do some rudimentary planning, but be ready for uncertainty and switch over to be sensitive to hidden costs of managing under uncertainty. There are enormous hidden costs of managing uncertainty. For example, in the context of supply chain management, the Japanese environment is just in time. Almost everything is deterministic. But Indian supply environment is just in case. So many uncertainties on demand and supply. And therefore, a good supply chain manager in Indian context would have to develop resilient supply chains and agile supply chains. And that's why perhaps because of that built-in resilience in such an enormous calamity of this 2 years of Corona time, Indian supply chain management in those critical times in terms of your basic needs of food and medicine, you can see have done remarkably well. Because the tendency to manage in a confused environment is intrinsic to us. And therefore, perhaps we have managed the pandemic or the scale of the country that we are and the limitation of the resources that we have, the remarkable management of the pandemic that we have done primarily is owing to a tremendous capacity in us to face uncertainties, manage crisis, and because the best in us comes out in that, and therefore we improve. So the kind of requirement you require is a resilient leadership. A resilient leadership is the basic requirement in a VUCA world, which is an optimal mix of transformational and transactional leadership or a servant leadership relationship. You try to be, as a leader, your servant, your serving attitude in people, serving the society, serving the employers, serving the students, community, serving the faculty, that servant leadership, and not a boss-centric leadership, which is optimal mix of transformational and transactional. Now, transactional is following the rule, process, a process-driven manager. Transformational is inspirational-driven manager to expect greater, accomplishment. What perhaps you need both, because transformational leadership is required to achieve greater heights. Transactional leadership is structured management, but you have to be both transformational and transactional, and therefore a resilient leadership is an optimal mix of transformational and transactional leadership style, a servant leadership style. And some of the therefore common characteristics to succeed in VUCA environment: a maker-centric ability to exploit inner drive to build and grow things as well as connect with others, a tremendous capacity to grow and connect with others, clarity, ability to see through the mess and contradictions, very clear about the goal but very flexible in achieving it. So you have that clarity and ability to see through the mess and contradictions and fog, but very clear about the goal you want to achieve, but very flexible in achieving it. Dilemma flapping ability to convert dilemmas into opportunities. Immersive learning ability, learn from unfamiliar things in first person by way of immersing into it. And therefore, bioempathy, see things from nature's perspective, how nature has its own clarity to cope up with change. Constructive depolarizing ability to calm tensions and situations with differences and communication breakdown. When there is confusion, breakdown of communication, how to depolarize situation and constructive. Managing people with different perspective, diverse cultural background and constructive engagement. Managing diversity has become an extremely important feature. And quiet transparency, open, authentic, without over-advertising. You become very transparent in your functioning, very open, authentic, but much, don't do so much. If you over-advertise or advertise, you become a target. Therefore, if you are achieving, people would know it. If you're transparent, people would know it. So be quiet, transparent, open, and authentic without too much of advertisement. Because if you advertise, you become rapid prototype, ability to create quickly early version of innovations. Early version, because learn as you go. Quick, rapid prototyping is rapid, quick, as you know, situation is unfolding. But keep on having version 1, version 2, version 3. Learn as you go. Learn from setbacks and failures. Smart mobilizing ability to engage with and nurture people, linkages, social networking through IT, diaspora, with intense value-centered leanings. Commons creative ability, nurture and grow shared assets that can benefit other players and allow competition at higher level is an ultimate future leader skills. And therefore, leaders can make a great difference in organizations, and therefore role model leadership style theory would work. Small, some universal leadership traits are, now, for example, all this VUCA environment, but some common traits: sharp intellect, quick learnability, compassion, empathy, holistic vision, but thorough in execution. Eye for details, missing dimension, but extremely important. She can see through implications of action before acting, and capacity to take calculated risk, flexibility in approach, punctuality, leading by setting examples, open-minded and personal integrity are some of the common personality traits of great leaders, and that's what would perhaps help you in managing under. In fact, I'm now almost through with my time. Somehow I'm able to achieve my goal within the time context that I mentioned. I'll perhaps stop sharing now, and if there are, okay. And therefore, this is what I wanted to see, Dr. Natarajan, if you are listening to me.
Yes, Professor. Yes, Professor. We are very grateful for you. It was a wonderful session, knowledgeable session. Few faculty members and students will be interacting with you, Professor.
Yeah, absolutely.
They have some questions also.
Most welcome. Most welcome.
Yes, Professor.
Most welcome. Yeah. Yeah. I can see your conference room, but then I can't see individuals. And those people are logged in from outside might, in fact, might even...
nearby room, they have logged in, sir. Now they... Yes.
Okay, doesn't matter. Yes. Yeah, good. No issues. Actually, as I mentioned that I adapted very fast. Can you imagine in 54 years history, for the last 2 years, I'm teaching students without seeing them. And yet I'm able to go through.
In both ways, sir. It is also a new experience for faculty members, but they have learned very quickly.
Yeah.
They have learned. They have a lot of tools, sir.
This is what is required: a quick learnability, because you never know what situation would come in future, and the capacity to learn fast is the key word for success.
Correct, sir. Correct.
Okay. Yeah, please.
Namaste, sir. It was a very informative session that we had, and we were very fortunate to hear your expert lecture. And have a question like, what takes us to be a VUCA leader, sir?
No, that's what I've been in fact telling you. What takes you to be a VUCA leader is some of the traits are there already in you by virtue of being an Indian. You have greater ambiguity, tolerance for you have a greater tolerance for ambiguity, and therefore all those things are there. But what needs to take it? Develop those essential skills of leadership, which in my last PPT I mentioned. For example, be a team player. For example, develop credibility. Do yourself what you expect others to do, because that's where you develop credibility. If you promise something, deliver it. Otherwise, don't promise. Be fair, transparent. Be a leading. So therefore, all that I was saying is that these are to be nurtured and be flexible. In fact, I emphasize. In fact, if you want one or two traits to be developed in you, I'll go for first is develop that capacity to balance your own personal interest with the interest of others. Because as I mentioned, utmost concern for self and little concern for others is one value distortion that we have. So that if we can, because I can only do customer delight if I know if I care for customer, and because customer is someone else. So if my value grid is balanced, that means I do not flourish at the cost of others. And second is I myself do what I expect others to do. That's what I mean, a role model or a leading by setting example. Because otherwise, many times we as teachers say something else in a classroom, and our own personal conduct is so different from what we said in the classroom, it doesn't cut much ice with the students. Therefore, if they know, because that's why I say that a teacher can never be replaced, because the very presence of a teacher in a classroom, the values are caught and not taught. And therefore, as a result, if you want to be a great teacher, let's say, have that compassion but be passionate about your students, take care. There could be weak students, but do the greater hand holding for them. And therefore, all these things that I covered is what required for VUCA. But as I mentioned, that by training, we are cut out for but successful in a confused environment. We enjoy working. We are a crisis-driven mindset, and therefore this crisis-driven mindset can be an advantage in a VUCA environment, which otherwise is not a great thing. Now, environment is not my hand. I'm not saying that VUCA is a great environment. That's an environment thrust on us by maybe globalization. But so long as I'm in that environment, VUCA would be helpful. But as a long-term process, you should try to cut down the uncertainty. The external environment is not a. But the second important trait is flexibility. I often give that example of flexibility. In a VUCA environment, if you're not flexible in approach, you're not rigid. If you're very, very rigid rules have lost meaning in current times. So while rules are supposed to facilitate achievement of goals, that's the purpose of rule that I see. And therefore, in interpreting, you possibly cannot have a rule for every possible situation. So the capacity to understand that the rule cannot cover this situation, but the situation is genuine. So either revise the rule or have flexibility of having an informed, well-intentioned exceptions to that rule. It's important because flexibility is a key word. And one way, if I give an analogy of how the human body is an excellent example of a well-managed system. Now look at the complex system that human body is, and perhaps you look at the state of technology that the human body has. Even the latest technology is not able to, for example, thought-actuated control system. While technology engineers are still struggling to develop sensors and actuators were thought-actuated. You think about it, you think that the plane should stop and it stops. Human body has thought-actuated control systems where sometimes the very thought actuates control action on you. So therefore, it's such a complex human body is one of the most well-managed system. Perfect teamwork. But what is one single trait is flexibility. Look at my fingers. No robotics has so many degrees of freedom that my fingers have. I am flexible, but optimal degree of flexibility. But the moment I die, it brings rigidity. So to me, rigidity is synonymous to death in a dynamic world. In a dynamic world, the human body can adjust to such a, from 0 degree in Delhi to 47 degree Delhi. I survive every year because I'm able to adapt. Because of the flexibility of the human body. Similarly, in our organization, should be able to adapt in a situation very fast like human body does. And this requires a single trait, and that of flexibility of approach. To me, flexibility is a key word. Rigidity actually would kill an organization. Because in a VUCA world, in a deterministic, yes, fine. If it's a deterministic world, but even here I must say, for example, a human body example I give you, optimal flexibility where required functionally. For example, there's enormous flexibility in my tongue. Otherwise, I can't eat. But my legs, there is no flexibility in bones. So if suppose imagine my tongue were rigid and my bones were flexible, there will be no life. So what it means, the message it gives you, be rigid where you ought to be. For example, when it comes to ethics and values, be rigid in terms of ethics and values. No compromise on ethics, values, and integrity and honesty. But when it comes to areas other than values and ethics, be flexible and improve. Somebody is genuinely sick, couldn't come and therefore interpret on the intentions, and therefore your approach should be to serve, and rules should not be treated as, suppose rule itself was outdated now. The rule that was formed was outdated. We must make rules which are more relevant now, but have flexibility of interpretation. That's the way I look at it. So have flexibility of approach and compassion. And as I said, single thing, build on relationships. It matters. With good relationship with colleagues, small problems can be sorted out, will not be magnified. With bad relationships, small problems would be magnified to a big one, and you'll be spending more time on less important things. So prioritize your time. Don't waste your time on trivialities. And this can only happen if you have a good relationship. People would ignore your trivial mistakes here and there. Okay, all right. I don't know, but my entire lecture was based on what your question was. Yeah, others, please. Yeah, over to you.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon.
We had an awesome session. Thank you for having you, sir. And I have a question.
Please.
What happens if there is no VUCA environment right now?
If there is no VUCA environment, then then what is required for stable environment for if there is no VUCA? Yeah, for example, in today's world, if I give the example of suppose if all the courses that you're running can be filled in with good quality intake, no issues. Then you say give 60 seats to mechanical, 60 to civil, 60 to electronics, 60 to computer, and do a great job. But suppose there are not many takers in let's say chemical engineering, maybe reduce the seats to 30. That's adjusting. So in non-VUCA environment, you have prescribed, you set your targets. You can follow in automated systems. You can your technology can be routinized. You can have a rigid structures. You can follow rules, highly codified policies and rules, because there's a rule to define every situation, and that would work. In fact, the two extremes I talked about in my presentation, one was for a non-VUCA environment, that deterministic. The other is for VUCA environment. I'd given the continuum for both of them. And then in a non-VUCA environment, optimization would work, all quantitative techniques would work, and scientific model of management would work effectively on that promise. Okay.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I one more thing.
Yeah.
Ask a question. What's the strength of the VUCA, sir?
Pardon?
Strength of VUCA.
The degree of VUCA is the environment. VUCA is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. You have to measure it first, because VUCA doesn't mean that every situation is as VUCA. The degree of uncertainty would vary from place to place. So what is important? You know what is the degree of VUCA in your context, and accordingly, in fact, some other situation may be far more VUCA than your situation. So it's a continuum from completely stable environment to a fairly uncertain. And therefore, this would be varying from situation to situation. You need to characterize that first, measure it. How uncertain is your environment is a part of measuring that environment. That's why you have that environmental scanning. You try to find out how uncertain is the situation I'm in. For example, how uncertain is the market, how uncertain the demand scenario, how uncertain is the employment scenario. It has to be measured in a given situation.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you, Sandy.
Okay. Okay, Natarajan, if there are no questions.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon. Yeah.
I'm a student in third year IT in Hindustan. I had a question.
Mm-hmm.
How do you manage the volatile situation in VUCA world?
No, I've been saying volatile situation is highly changing. So the rate of change has to be carefully measured. In fact, my entire presentation was meant for how to manage volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So volatility means that things are changing very fast. And therefore, based on that, depending upon what you're managing, suppose let me give an example here. You're managing a supply chain where the enormous dynamics of the change is extremely volatile. That means the demand is huge variations. Demand may be from 0, it may be 100. Similarly, there's huge volatility in the exchange rate. The dollar and rupee is changing every other day. In that case, you need to provide a shield which will absorb this uncertainty in kind of a buffer, so that the uncertainty, volatility is captured in that buffer that you provide. This could be buffer by way of MOU that you purchase oil for next 1 month under a constant rate, so that you're absorbing volatility by signing an MOU that irrespective of the price change every day, I'll pay the same dollar value. And therefore, there are MOUs. So there are specific actions that the managers have to do by absorbing that volatility, by providing a shield around you, so that that uncertainty can be captured and managed. Okay. Okay. All right. I can see that your people, your students perhaps are getting slightly uneasy. The later seats are vacant in the left hand side. Doesn't matter. My task is over. Only those who are interested in asking questions need to stay. And it's only interactive session now. My main session is over, 10 to 12.
Yes, Professor. Yes, the students who are interested to ask questions, they are coming to that.
This is it's a very natural. You see, I've been a teacher all through. I'm able to manage complexity. I'm able to manage diversity. So therefore, it's logical. Only if few people who are interested are there to ask questions, fine with me.
Yes, Professor, I could also see the entire presentation. You are so energetic and your enthusiasm, and I'm very much exciting, Professor, because at this stage, for continuously 2 hours, you have been explaining very clearly, and probably the questions are same. However, they ask about how they manage, everything. I come to understand the same questions, but still you are answering the questions, Professor. But besides teaching, you had interactions with other industries, organizations, people. That is great, Professor. I'm wondering how you.
Actually, the reason for that is, otherwise you tell me, at my age, I don't need to teach. My pension is good enough from IIT Delhi to survive. I have very simple habits.
Correct.
Why do I take all this? Because the golden rule here is for the teachers. In fact, I love the job that I do.
Exactly, sir.
I was topper in IIT Kharagpur, but I prefer not to join the industry because I know the best in me will come out if I join the teaching. So golden rule is do the job that you love and love the job that you do.
Correct.
My only mantra, why in these 54 years I still am the same passionate, whatever passion I had in 68 when I joined as a lecturer in IIT Delhi, I retain that now because I love the job that I do, and to me, lecturing with a passion is a tonic for me. And this is a mantra. If you love the job that you do, then it's not a burden. But if you do the job that you don't enjoy doing, then it becomes a burden. And that's why my request to the teachers is that while teaching might not have been your first choice, ideally speaking, the best you should have been your first choice. To me, there is no job better than a teacher. That's the way I look at life. To me, there is no job better than a teacher because the whole country's future is given to you. You're a custodian. You are a person who has a part of. So if I take teaching as not as an employee, as a nation building process. So therefore, while best and the brightest of society must join teaching as a first love. That's my request. But till you are in that job, love it. Because if you love the job that you do, even if it was not your first job, first love, but you love the job that you do, passion would come in time to come. You'll learn, and eventually you'll start discovering enormous benefits of being a great teacher. To me, teacher gives you, deferred wages. Some of my students, in fact, they've held high positions in life. They yet respect me as a teacher because there is no compensation for a great teacher. So that's the way that you love for it. And that passion keeps me going.
You reflect the voices of Abdul Kalam, Professor.
No, I won't. No, I'm doing my honest job. I love teaching. I joined it and I continue to be in this. So that's why, despite being a vice chancellor, for example, when I joined as a director of IIT Roorkee, although in IIT Delhi I was director in 2000, so I was teaching 1-2 courses. In Roorkee, when I started teaching in mechanical engineering, industrial engineering subject, people say, no, more directors, vice chancellor don't teach here. I said, I do teaching. So I taught in IIT Roorkee as a director, every semester a course, undergraduate and MBA. once in undergraduate, once in MBA. I guided BTech projects. I guided MTech projects. I produced 2 PhDs in a single term of 5 years.
Great, Professor. Great.
And in addition, I did all that I was expected to do as a director. So the transformational Roorkee experience during that period. So it's not that I was doing this at the cost of my job as a director. I do not. To me, teacher in me comes first.
Okay, sir.
And the rest of them is additional responsibilities given, which again I must do with the sincerity. If you take a job, do it well. But then this teaching I do for my own good, because I feel very happy in contributing to a cause of the society.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you. Thank you, Professor. We are expecting, probably we have preponed, Professor. On 12th, we will be having the second lecture, expert talk, Professor.
Okay, I'll do that. Because actually almost my every day is booked now. So that's why on 19th, I would be in IT Monday for that board meeting.
We understand, Professor. We understand.
I'll do that. Okay, good.
Thank you very much.
Send me the topic for the next, because I might have overlooked your list earlier.
I'll do that, Professor.
And keep the AICTE in loop so that
Professor. Yes, Professor.
Because it's on behalf of AICTE. I'm doing. Of course, it's a cause that I'm contributing to, but facilitated by AICTE.
Yes, Professor. Yes, Professor.
All the best. Good luck. Thank you very much. I'll stop here now.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sir?
முடிஞ்சிருச்சு தம்பி.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
லீவ் பண்ணிட்டாங்க. ஹால்லையும் க்ளோஸ் பண்ணிருங்க. நீங்க உங்க போர்ட் ரூம்லயே க்ளோஸ் பண்ணுங்க.
சார் அதான் क्वेश्चंस கொஞ்சம் அப்படியே சிமிலரா வந்தது, அதனால தான் கொஞ்சம் க்ளோஸ் பண்ணிட்டேன் நான்.
எஸ் சார். கரெக்ட்டா சார்.
அண்டர்ஸ்டாண்ட் பண்ணிட்டேன். நான் அடுத்த டாபிக் வரும்போது டாபிக் என்னன்னு நான் பார்த்துட்டு அந்த क्वेश्चंस கொஞ்சம் மேனேஜ் பண்ணிக்கலாம்னு இருக்கேன். ஏன்னா அது அவருக்கும் அதே திருப்பி சொல்றது பாவம். அவரும் ஒரு 25 minutes இன்டராக்ஷன் போதும் சார். அதுக்கு மேல ரொம்ப வந்து நம்ம போட்டு அவரை டிஸ்டர்ப் பண்ண வேண்டியது இல்லை. ஏன்னா 2 hours கண்டினியூஸா அவர் எடுத்தாரு. அது வந்து நம்மளே முடியாதுங்க, அவ்வளவு நேரம் பேச முடியாது. அது வந்து பெரிய அச்சீவ்மெண்ட் மாதிரி தான் அதெல்லாம். ஓகே சார், இப்போ நீங்க அந்த ஃபீட்பேக் கொடுக்கணும் சார். இப்போ அந்த ஒரு கூகுள் ஃபார்ம் ஒன்று இருக்கும். அதுல எவ்வளவு பேர் அட்டெண்ட் பண்ணாங்க என்னங்கிற மாதிரிலாம் இருக்கும்னு நினைக்கிறேன். அது அருண் கொடுக்குறானா இல்ல
அருண் ரெடி பண்ணிடுவாரு சார்.
அது இல்ல என் மெயில இருந்து தான் கொடுக்கணும்னு நினைக்கிறேன். இப்போ வர சொல்லுங்க, நான் அந்த கூகுள் ஃபார்ம் போயிட்டுங்க பண்ணிக்கலாம். அப்புறம் ரிப்போர்ட் அனுப்பிச்சுக்கலாம்.
ரைட் சார். தேங்க்யூ சார். தேங்க்யூ வெரி மச்.
மற்றவங்களும் லீவ் பண்ணிக்கலாம். ஓகே.
ஓகே சார். தேங்க்யூ சார்.